Hey, hey, beloveds! I am so delighted to be here with you on Fierce Friday. I missed Speak Up Thursday yesterday, and so I wanted to jump in today and have a little conversation about something that I really love to talk about. And I began this conversation actually when I was on retreat with my third level priestesses in Bali around the anatomy of fear and the true nature of what fear is and what we think it is and why that gets us into, well, I guess a lot of the kind of superficial engagement with spirituality and not really understanding what we're talking about basically when it comes to these really big ideas of fear and love. So I want to talk about the anatomy of love as well, because I don't think it's just fear that we have confusion around. I think love is equally confusing for people because there is this, we're kind of confusing human love and divine love in the same way that we're confusing physiological fear with fear that is actually a helpful messenger. So I just want to recap on what physiological fear versus fear as a friendly ally is. And this came up last time, and it was a really hot button topic, and I completely understand that. I just want to make sure that it's clear when I speak about fear, I am not speaking about the biological response that the body has when you are unsafe and you need to get out of somewhere because it's not safe for you to be there. And that is both the physiological response to understanding that your environment is not safe and therefore having a release of the stress hormones which help you get up and out as quickly as possible, as well as what is happening there is your survival intuition, as Caroline Myss calls it, or your energetic sensitivity to your environment, which you'll often feel in your solar plexus, which is that absolute gut instinct that you know without knowing how you know that something is wrong with yourself or the environment that you're in or the person that you're with or your children on the other side of the world. But you have a very strong visceral reaction, a fear-based reaction, which is about keeping you alive. And that is really what physiological fear is. And that's why intuition in its most base form, survival intuition, is rudimentary. And yet we still treat it as though it's a kind of special magic superpower, and therefore in our very secularized Western world, we ignore it. And yet how much trouble would we save ourselves, of course, if we listened to our intuition and that survival intuition, we actually showed up and responded to our survival intuition, which is life protecting life. It's trying to protect us from imminent danger. And that example came up particularly in regards to someone who was speaking about her experience of surviving childhood trauma or abuse. And, you know, she was talking about, well, my fear was real. And I was saying fear is not real. And she's like, but actually my fear was really real in that situation where I was in danger at the hands of someone who I should have been able to trust. And it was very important for me to clarify the difference between the physiological survival intuition, the injection of cortisol and, you know, adrenaline into your body, which is helping you get up and out of a situation that is not safe for you. And that is a very different thing to how I'm going to talk about fear now. The idea of fear as a friendly ally. So we will often do anything we can to run from fear. Yes, we are talking about here now the subconscious fear programs that arise in us as we begin to awaken, make us feel really uncomfortable. We get into, as Joe Dispenza says, that river of discomfort, and we're like, this feels bad. And if you're not prepared for it, even if you're like, yeah, I'm doing my shadow work, bring it, I want to meet the dark goddess, I'm all up for this, and then it gets uncomfortable and you go, oh shit, I don't want to, oh no, could someone just bring me a cocktail because I really don't want to feel what I'm feeling? And we'll go into our addictions, we'll go into the kind of strategies that the ego has come up with for us to prevent us from having to meet that subconscious fear program. So we have to see very strongly that the relationship between the strategies of the ego, when they rise, when your addictive impulses are rising, there's a very good chance that you're getting very close to meeting and releasing a fear-based subconscious program that's been sitting below the surface, simmering away there for some time. So how do we get comfortable with the discomfort? Well, we're going to talk about that as we go on. First of all, I want to talk about this anatomy of fear and the anatomy of love. what these things truly are and how they are truly serving us all of the time. So I love it. I saw an exchange between some of my priestesses. I think Beck was one of them this morning, in that, like, you know, yay, fear. Yay, fear's here. That means I can meet myself and get to know myself even better. And that's what happens when you start to recognize that fear is a friendly ally, course correcting you back to your God nature. And so instead of going into panic because you're suddenly uncomfortable, can you train yourself to sit with that discomfort and then apply the tools that will allow you to re-encode your consciousness, to excavate the subconscious basement and to draw that darkness into the light, so that you can know yourself as what you truly are, which is infinite and unlimited, whilst those faulty fear programs, which are false reality, they are not real, are running you subconsciously below your conscious reasoning mind level. You will always be a reduced or limited version of yourself. You will not be the full expression of what you are in truth, which is God or unlimited consciousness. So it is our work, and it is the true nature of shadow work, to get as uncomfortable as we can and be safe with that discomfort, rather than jumping into our addictions, which help us to suppress that, those uncomfortable feelings, and to avoid meeting ourselves as God. So your fear is knocking on the door saying, hey, did you notice that you forgot your God? I have some good medicine here. Shall we go do the work? And you go, oh, quick, I must pick a fight with my boyfriend, or I must quickly eat the cake, or look over here, I have to go and volunteer for that committee that I never heard of before. You will use your busyness, you'll use your emotional chaos, you'll use your addictions, you'll use all of your human experience as a way to prevent yourself becoming more glorious and more full expression of what you are. And that's because it's uncomfortable. That discomfort, as Joe Dispenza tells us, is a physiological death. The greatest discomfort we experience is at the end of belief. So when we're coming to the end of a limiting belief, that's where the discomfort will get really intense, and that's where we have to become most vigilant about not shoving something in our mouth, or picking a fight, or distracting ourselves, or telling us that actually I really, really just want to stay here and be a muggle for the rest of my life. And be willing to go into that unknown void space and just go, okay, I don't know what's here. That's why it's called shadow work, because it's dark down there. You don't have all of the lights on. You have to trust something greater than your own force, your own human capacity to force things into being. You have to surrender, and you're surrendering into the unknown. And human beings hate that. They hate that more than anything, and they'll work their asses off to avoid going into that space. And yet that is where you will meet yourself as God. So how do we train ourselves to sit with that discomfort? And we do that by knowing that we have tools and strategies that we can engage at any time to actively engage and make friends with that fear. Now, if you've hung out with me for any amount of time, you know the tools I'm going to suggest are EFT, or tapping, the micro method, which is freely available. I give it away everywhere. You can do the meditation version where I guide you through it. You can read the written version. You can get a sister in my priestess posse to take you through it, because that's what they're training to do. There are innumerable ways that we can work with our fear, but here's the difference between a lot of the kind of shadow work and where shadow work stops being useful, is that what we're doing with meeting our fear and going into our shadow and embodying the dark goddess is not hanging out with our fear and looking for justification for why we are broken, and then using that as evidence as to why we can't evolve and move beyond it. To truly work with fear as a friendly ally, you have to be unafraid of fear. You're not looking at that fear as a problem, so you're not then going to use it as evidence as to why you are broken and cannot show up in the full expression of your gloriousness. You are seeing that fear as an illusion, which it is, as a friendly ally and as a messenger. And all you have to do is decode the message, because remember, your fear is sitting in your subconscious basement. That can't be accessed in ordinary states of consciousness. You can't be generally running around like a headless chook in the craziness of your life, like running and blah, 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 and expect to be able to truly engage and commune with your fear. This is deep work, deep soul work. Fear is deep soul work. And as soon as fear rises in my life, I'm like, stop, everybody stop. Mama's got to go in and meet this fear, because this has come up for something that is clearly going to get me to know myself as God, and I'm going to privilege that above everything else. So it's vital that you don't, it's vital that we don't put distraction between us. We go, I'll come back to that later. I'll do that tonight when I'm doing my pranayamas and whatnot. No, if you can, if you can create your life in this way, every impulse of fear that rises in you is saying, attention now. Do you know what happens if you don't meet that impulse of fear? It gets a little bit louder. And do you know what happens if you ignore it when it gets a bit louder? It gets a little bit louder. And again, and again, and again, until the tsunami of fear crashes into your life, and through some devastating or catastrophic event, you finally stop and you go, oh, okay, there's something here. I really should look into why this car crash just happened, or why that relationship just ended, or why I'm suddenly 20 kilos more than I was 6 months ago. And if you don't take the time to do the work as it's arising in you, it will just get louder. There's no mad magic about this. This is just the way it works. Fear is a friendly ally. Fear is lovingly guiding you home to yourself as God. And you're saying, no. You might be doing that paradoxically at the same time that you're paying $10,000 to go on retreat with someone, or at the same time that you're booking a ticket to Peru to get your spiritual on, or at the same time that you're sitting in your Vipassana for 10 days, or at the same time that you're buying all the freaking crystals. It's not going to work unless the intention of those things is to take you to meet yourself as God. And where do you meet yourself as God? You meet yourself as God in the darkness. Why? Why do we meet ourselves as God in our shadow? Because we have this subconscious fear program that is unmet for generations, unmet for all of this lifetime, because no one ever said meeting fear is the key to your freedom. Everyone has told you that putting a band-aid over your heavy, dark emotions and trying to pretend that they don't exist is the way that you go meet yourself as God. And that will not work. It is not possible. You can't create that reality of light and joy without meeting your fear first. So we have a mantra that we work with in the third level, which is first you meet your fear, then you create. So if I go to sit in meditation, for example, which I do every day, I go to sit in meditation and I'm like, everything's great. I'm feeling, and I go, oh, I don't know what that is, but that is ugly, and I can feel it sitting in here in my heart, and what is that? Now, what would normally happen is self-awareness, which us spiritual people are really good at, but that is also not the work that we need to be doing. And I might look through my brain and I might look for a story of why, Ricky, why have I got this heaviness in my heart? And I might be like, oh yeah, okay, my ego's come up with a really good story of how my relationship isn't as vibing as I want it to be this week, and my kids are really annoying, and I'll come up with all this evidence, and then I'll just sit there. That's self-awareness. Right? Nothing better about your day as a result of that. You've abandoned your meditation practice. Your ego has now given you an entire backstory as to why you feel crap. You get off the couch and you go and have 14 coffees and some kind of cake to make yourself feel better. No, sit back down. Don't go looking for the source or the cause of that fear. Just sit with the discomfort, because the discomfort is saying, let me birth you into a deeper truth. A deeper part of yourself is ready to be awakened right now by moving the subconscious fear out of you. And you just sit with it and you tune into that feeling state and you simply ask, okay, what is deeper than this feeling? And you let that information come to you non-locally through that incredible interconnectedness. The field that connects all of us contains all the information, and you let it tell you the story of what is truly happening, not what your ego wants you to believe is because someone behaved badly to you that day. And you go into that fear, okay, that fear that I am unlovable. Okay, well, that's shit, but thank God it's here, because I really, really want to be aware of how lovable I am in every moment of my life. So I'm super, super keen to go meet this one. And then you can use the micro method or tapping or whatever other tools you've got where you raise your vibration, you change your consciousness, you encode a new story into your subconscious basement, and voila, you're now free of that fear. That could take 3 minutes. When you get really good at this shit, like, let me hear my sisters here who've done the third level with me. You can work through this energy very, very quickly. This is not 20 years of therapy. The more you do this, the more quickly that fear is like plucking weeds from the garden. You just bum. You bam, not bum. And then you come back to your meditation, and then you create the new reality, the new future out of that void, that emptiness. You've created space. You can't be cramming your new vision of your life in on top of a whole bunch of shit that you haven't met, because nothing good is going to come of that. That is a superficial spirituality in which you are trying to avoid doing the work in order to try and pretend that everything is light and fluffy. Light and fluffy is a state of being you can inhabit, although I tell you what, deep and resonant is where I want to be. And that deep anchoring into yourself is the work, so that you may access those high dimensions, those high vibrational states, but not out of a naivety, out of a deep power of transformation. That is alchemy. And so go meet your fear with a willingness and do the work to alter, to change the code. First you meet your fear, then you create. So anytime you go to sit into your devotional practices and fear rises, you high five yourself, because you've created space for that fear to get your attention. And that is what you want. You do not want to wait until that fear has to like crash you into another car or break a limb or end a relationship so that you will finally pay attention. This work is always the work of the self, always. Meeting fear is always the work that you do for yourself, with yourself, by yourself, okay? You cannot be doing this with other people. You've got to take this work inside of yourself and be unafraid to go into that place of you that has all of the information. So when fear shows up, you start high-fiving and you sit down and you say, I'm sorry, I'm not available right now. I'm going to make time for this. What's on the other side of that fear? Okay, this is where we get into the anatomy of love. And the anatomy of love is this. We human beings, we ain't got a clue what love is. Let me tell you what we think love is. We think love is someone agreeing with us. We think love is someone condoning us. We think love is someone approving of us. We think love is someone appreciating us. We think love is someone delaying their life and their happiness in order to follow us around. We think love is ownership. We think love is the control of another human being. We think love is when the other person agrees with everything we say. We think love is when we have something in common with that other person, or we've lived in the same places as that other person. We think love is who we've given birth to. We think love is basically, if I get something from you, then I'm going to be willing to give you something in return. And usually in our partnerships, that is so conditional. Like, I will love you as long as you keep behaving as I want you to. And if you stop behaving as I want you to, then I'm going to say that you don't love me anymore. And I'm probably going to passively, aggressively manipulate you into expressing something that looks like love, but isn't love. This is what Course in Miracles calls the special relationship. And it's idolatrous. We're actually putting something, a human, between us and our infinite God nature, which is unconditional. So what is that divine God love? What is God love? It's 100% totally neutral. God's love for us, because we are God, so I don't want to get into the idea of there's God and there's us, but God's love, which we are a part of and simply have forgotten, is 100% neutral. It isn't about, I've got this rush of good hormones because I'm really sexually attracted to you. And it isn't about, oh my God, I would give up my life for you and have your babies for you and put all my happiness aside for you. That is not God love. Divine love or God love is 100% emotionally neutral. I'm going to explain what that means. It is simply a power. And that power is so vast and so infinite and so all-consuming, it is all that there is, that we ascribe a kind of human personality to it because we cannot begin to wrap our heads around it. Our ego simply cannot understand what infinite love feels like. But it has nothing to do with us getting what we want, and everything to do with us knowing what it is to surrender, to let go, and to understand completely that it is a self-generating state that is 100% not responding to external evidence or stimulus. So that love state that we can experience as bliss, that's how we experience it bodily. But when we're thinking about it as a force or a power externally, it's neutral. And that is simply because it doesn't have an agenda. It's not trying to manipulate or control us or to get us. It's not trying to teach us anything. It's not giving us lessons. It literally does not care what you do with your precious human life. It does not care. But it will give you whatever you request. It will give you whatever it is that you ask for. And it will do that in a way that is going to serve your return to the truth that you are infinite, unlimited consciousness. So consciousness is simply a power. It isn't light and fluffy. It is simply a power. But the reason why it feels so good when we start to go unconditional and we start to truly merge with that God mind is because it's the opposite of the ego. The ego is absolutely about restriction, control, and fear. It's trying to hold us tiny and small. And what happens when you move out of that state and you begin to merge with God love, and I'm sure we've all experienced it, it's like bliss, because suddenly what was constricted is open and free and expansive. And so you move into this state of absolute freedom. And that freedom has no control, no boundaries, no one telling you that if it doesn't look like this or it doesn't do that, it's not truly lovable. It's simply a return to what you truly are. And so to us, it feels like this absolute sense of bliss and joy. But divine love is never about rushes of hormones, of feeling like you're getting your needs met, because it's self-contained. Divine love is 100% self-contained. There is nothing outside of it that will take away from it or add to it. So I hope that difference is beginning to become clear between what we assume love is and what love actually is. Divine love, God love is. If something is all and is absolute perfect holiness, how can it need or want anything from you or be improved or reduced by anything? It can't. It's simply not possible. So that state of holiness is what it feels like. The joy and the bliss that our physiology gives us is holiness, or return to oneness, that sense of union with self, not with other. That there is no one you can have a union with outside of you that will elicit that same relation, that same feeling that you have when you union or join with self, that marriage to yourself. That union with self is the bliss that comes when we remember that there is nothing outside of us, because we are all. So that which is all contains all within it. And that is the same for us. The holographic image, the part contains the whole. That idea of divine love can't really be understood intellectually. It has to be experienced. And I'm sure, as I said, most people here have had a moment, even if it's fleeting, where you have felt that sense of absolute union with self, and it feels like bliss. It feels like unlimitedness. And that's because it is. So I really want you to stop thinking in terms of, when we talk about love is all there is, there's been some derision of that in my world lately, where people are like, well, love clearly isn't all there is, because look at the state of the world and blah, 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 blah. But we're not talking about human love. We're not talking about man-made love. We're not talking about love that exists in the dream. We're talking about the absolute unconditional free will love that God is the purveyor of and exists within us because we are God. We are working back to that state, and going back into that state will inevitably release bliss through the body, but release joy into the physiology, because it is like coming home. It is coming home, and that recognition will trigger all of those hormones, which will bring you into that state. And that's what we are all yearning for. We're not yearning for someone who is going to tell us how great we are outside of us. That's spiritual narcissism. That's just where we need constant external validation in order to try and, have a sense of self and self-worth. And it's a very dangerous game to play, and it's about power. It's about abuse of power. So for us to begin to recognize that divine love has nothing to do with the man-made construct of love is the beginning of us breaking free. Just as understanding what fear truly is and the anatomy of fear is so different to understanding what the ego will try to tell you fear is. Fear is, to the ego, this death, the death of the ego, because it knows that if you go and meet your fear, you will be relinquished from that fear. So the ego will tell you that fear is actually a problem, and if you don't, if you ignore it, then you're safe. So that's where all the strategies, the emotional chaos, constantly seeing yourself as the victim, constantly staying in your naive child, constantly sabotaging your own life, constantly being the prostitute, sitting in your shadow archetypes, is how you avoid being with the shadow. But the shadow archetypes can lead you into the darkness, into the subconscious, into that basement where you need to go in order to meet God. On the other side, you will find the gateway to the one mind, and it's our job. That is what shadow work is, and it's designed to get you uncomfortable, because those feelings of discomfort are the physiological death of the addiction to that fear. So be safe in that. You are experiencing, as Joe Dispenza tells us, the end of belief will elicit the chemical death, the hormonal death, the epigenetic death, the death of all of those physiological addictions, and that will be uncomfortable, and that's okay, and you're completely safe to do that. What you're not safe to do is to keep suppressing those feelings of discomfort, to try and band-aid over and pretend everything is light and fluffy, and that spirituality is all about feeling good and using your tools to prevent yourself meeting your darkness. Go meet your darkness. Go meet your shadow, because that is where you will find God, and that's where you'll find yourself as God. Okay. I'm going to leave it there. Thank you so much for everyone who's commenting. I didn't sort of take a deep breath in to even have a look at any of them. I'm very excited about this conversation. So if you do have any questions, I'll come by and have a look at the comment thread, and I'll see if I can add anything to the conversation. But thank you so much for being here, and thank you for sharing that with me. I think this is it. I think this may be one of the vital missing keys in much contemporary spirituality, which is why we have such a superficial relationship with our spirituality, which is why spirituality is being accused of lots and lots of things right now that I actually don't think are spirituality's problem. I think it's our fear of engaging, of taking that vow of deep commitment to our devotion rather than just superficial engagement, because, you know, it makes us look good or cool or trendy or whatever it is. And to actually go into and make time for devotion. I shared something on my page about this, is that nothing in your world will tell you that devotion is valuable. You have to inspire that inner fire to make space for that devotion, because if you don't, you will never be able to do this work. You cannot do this work running around in a crazy reality. You have to go into those altered states of consciousness and change your brainwave state so that you can access the subconscious mind and get into the shadow and do the work. Just do the work. Mwah! Have a beautiful Friday.